This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis meets people with disabilities at the Vatican and says that the Church should look to better include them during Sunday Mass. The Catholic Church in Papua New Guinea is very particular. Meet Bishop Donald Lippert and hear his story of being a missionary there. The Holy Father holds a live streaming conversation with astronauts working at the International Space Station. Discover with us what the Pope and the astronauts talked about. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Before the Angelus prayer on Sunday, October the 29th, Pope Francis explained the Gospel of the day. This week's passage recounted the story of how the Pharisees tested Jesus by asking him which of the commandments is the greatest, to which Jesus responded, "Love God and your neighbor."
This response is not obvious, because among the many precepts of the Jewish law, the 10 Commandments, given directly by God to Moses, were the most important, because they were conditions of the covenant between God and His people. But Jesus wants to make us understand that without love of God and of our neighbor, there can be no true fidelity to the covenant.
The Holy Father said that Jesus seeks to help them put order in their religiosity, to re-establish what really matters, and what is at a lesser degree of importance.
What Jesus proposes in this evangelical page is a wonderful ideal, which corresponds to the most authentic desire of our heart. In fact, we were created to love and to be loved.
And to realize this, the Holy Father said that we should receive love that comes from God Himself in the Eucharist. On Saturday, October the 28th, Pope Francis appealed to the political and religious leaders of Europe, saying that the family should be considered the model of our society.
The family is the harmonious union of the differences between man and woman, which becomes stronger and more authentic to the extent that it is fruitful, capable of opening itself to life and to others.
The high religious and secular leaders of Europe gathered in Rome from October the 27th to the 28th to attend Rethinking Europe, a conference organized by the bishops' conferences of the European Community.
Person and community are thus the foundations of the Europe that we, as Christians, want and can contribute to building. The bricks of this structure are dialogue, inclusion, solidarity, development, and peace.
Recent events such as Brexit, the declaration of independence in Catalonia, Spain, and the widespread migration crisis are creating a feeling of instability across Europe. In today's political landscape, Pope Francis said the primary goal of the European Union is peace.
The European Union will remain faithful to its commitment to peace only to the extent that it does not lose hope and can renew itself in order to respond to the needs and expectations of its citizens.
Over the course of the last week, the Holy Father had 3 ecumenical meetings. First, the Pope received the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, Theophilos III. Both Christian leaders called for an end to violence and discrimination in the Holy Land.
The Holy City, whose status quo must be defended and preserved, ought to be a place where all can live together peaceably.
The Holy Father also expressed his desire to progress on the way to full unity with the Orthodox Church.
It is not possible to change the past, but without forgetting the grave failures of charity over the centuries, let us look to a future of full reconciliation and fraternal communion, and take up the work before us, as the Lord desires.
Reverend Dr. Derek Browning, moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, also visited the Pope. During their meeting, the Holy Father recalled the 500th anniversary of the Reformation and his visit to Lund, Sweden last year. He thanked God for the great gift of being able to live the year in true fraternity, going forward in the ecumenical journey. And Pope Francis met with the leader of the Anglican Church, Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby.
Very good to see you again.
The Anglican leader introduced the Pope to the new Anglican representative to the Holy See, Archbishop Bernard Tauturi from Burundi, Africa. An American Capuchin friar, Bishop Donald Lippert, serves in Papua New Guinea, one of the remotest places on earth. We met up with him in Rome to speak about the state of the Catholic Church in Papua New Guinea.
Well, as you can imagine, it's a very remote place. The infrastructure is not that good. The roads are pretty bad. And there are still some challenges from some difficult beliefs that the people hold on to from their past ways. But as they embrace the Catholic faith, in fact, I think that is the most beautiful part. I think the church can be the most helpful thing for them, because they live in a society that is very chaotic and very unsure. And so the church, I think, it gives them a place to stand, a secure place to stand, and can really help them kind of overcome some of the challenges that they might have. And we have our challenges as well, but we also have the faith which gives us the strength to keep moving on.
Bishop Lippert arrived in Papua New Guinea 10 years ago. In 2012, he was appointed bishop of the Diocese of Mendi in the southern highland region of Papua New Guinea. The bishop says that by working here, he's really experiencing the true Catholic feeling of the church. The local people have embraced the faith as something that is not foreign, but truly theirs. Even the bishop's pectoral cross is there to witness this.
This is a Tau cross. It's in the shape of a Tau, a T, which is a traditional Franciscan symbol. But it was made by one of the local people for me out of a shell that used to be their money, the Kina shell.
Christianity is on the rise there. Today, Catholics make up 25% of the whole population. One of the visible signs of this growth is the building of a new church in the pastoral area of the Diocese of Mendi.
And so very recently, the people themselves, without any help from the diocese, without any help from outside agencies, came together and built a beautiful church in a small little place. And I was almost amazed when I saw it for the first time.
It's a pastoral area, so as they build this church building, they're also working to build the church as a community. And that means they're becoming more self-reliant in terms of finances. They have active ministries going on. They have parish leadership among the laity, and a very strong number of young people who are involved in the church. Bishop Lippert is also seeing a positive change in the mentality of the people. He says that in the past they lived in constant fear of evil spirits and tribal fighting. But after embracing the Catholic faith, that fear is dissipating.
For me, that's one of the greatest things. The faith that they have embraced lets them, frees them from the fear that I think was so part of their life in the past.
Thanks for watching. Get ready to take a look at Holy See diplomacy in action. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano.
The Human Rights and Alliance of Civilizations room at the UN Geneva. Here met at the end of October the open-ended intergovernmental working group on transnational corporations with respect to human rights. The Holy See expressed its concern that international corporations carve an in-between existence to evade national legislation and choose only jurisdictions that offer the best return in terms of profit.
But profit cannot be the only rational goal of business activity. When human rights are neglected, a systemic exclusion of the vulnerable comes about. What is needed is stronger norms, stronger laws, and regulations to ensure that those who do not behave in ways that are consistent with these norms are held accountable.
This open-ended working group is an informal consultation of all states of the UN and observer states, as the Holy See is, and can lead to a treaty on the subject.
The Holy See is aware that there are no easy solutions to address the multifaceted challenges of business and human rights, or to provide the effective remedy and accountability that victims legitimately seek as a matter of urgency.
We asked the First Secretary about any influence of the Holy See when it comes to the content of documents and treaties.
This is part of our interventions. This could be part of the negotiation which will be in the future, and as well the Holy See is very respected on this, because we try to defend the human rights, and also because there are so many groups of NGOs and human rights defenders who also look at the Holy See for add its voice in this process.
Labour and corporate laws vary from country to country. One of the goals of the UN is a globalization of these laws. Therefore, the purpose of this working group was also to reaffirm that state parties' obligations regarding the protection of human rights do not stop at their territorial borders. I have a question regarding the intervention itself, the statements. How does this work? Is the nuncio writing these interventions and then makes a telephone call to the Pope, and the Pope listens and says, yes, okay, you can say that? How does it work technically?
Well, I don't think the Pope has the time to follow all the speeches that the nuncio say. Usually when the Holy See delegations and the multilateral fora take the floor, it always, there is a text which usually can be prepared by our office or by the Secretary of State in Rome, and which anyway has received the approval from Rome to be delivered, so we can be sure that when we take the floor, the Secretary of State is behind us and is approved our text. The reality shows that those affected by business abuses, especially in certain jurisdictions, tend also to use private law, which needs to be transformed to respond better to those challenges. In this sense, it could be critical that the offences be defined with sufficient clarity in the treaty, and always on condition that criminal liability of the legal entity does not exclude the personal, individual criminal responsibility of company directors or managers.
How long does the process take really to ratify a paper and then try to implement it?
Well, to make 195, I think, countries, the member of the United Nations, agree on something is not really easy, and the situation can change, and you want everybody on board, because an international convention which doesn't have the greatest number of countries aboard is useless. So it could be 4 to 5 years just to arrive to some sort of draft, which could be a basis, an acceptable basis to initiate the operation of a conference.
And the Holy See was right from the start being involved?
We were involved in inspiring, especially Ecuador and South Africa, to steer up this process.
So I'm sure we see you over the next few years here in the same type of conference, hopefully with progress, right?
Well, the Holy See will be certainly.
The Apostolic Nuncio to the UN works already on his next intervention, but the mission is always the same: to promote and protect human rights, and to be a voice for victims of abuses, whether perpetrated by international corporations, states, or anyone else.
People with intellectual disabilities and their caretakers from around the world united in Rome to discuss a better way for them to be actively engaged in the life of the Church. And as expected, the most moving moment of this 3-day conference was the private meeting with the Pope.
The growth in awareness of the dignity of every person, especially the weakest, has led to taking courageous positions to ensure the inclusion of those who live with different forms of handicap, so that no one should feel a stranger in their own home.
The Holy Father said that the Church should look to better include people with disabilities during Sunday Masses, and that the community should work on finding more adequate forms of teaching them the Catechism. Joe Apicella and other specialists from Great Britain have developed a way to teach the Bible through acting.
So we're working with a group of adults with learning difficulties, and we're trying to bring to life some of the stories that are in the Bible.
The stories of the Bible are narrated for and together with disabled people. each participant takes on a role.
I think it's very important. It's their way of showing their love of God and their way of showing love for their community.
There is a lot of understanding and love and inclusion in the church, but there are some people who still think that the church should be silent and stuffy and not moving forward.
And it was exactly this problem the Pope was warning against in his speech. He said that the narcissistic or utilitarian vision of life is causing this exclusion. Dr. Liam Waldron, an expert on reaching out to the disabled through the Catechism, says that loneliness and isolation are very serious problems for people with disabilities and learning difficulties.
So what can we do? There's a lot of talk about friendship, and the formation of friendships is not that difficult. We have to not only include people in our parishes on a Sunday, but we have to create a link with them from Sunday to the following Sunday.
There are many things that people with disabilities can do in the church, and over the years that I've been working with adults with learning difficulties, we've seen them serving, giving out hymn books, reading in the Mass, joining choirs and singing.
Every one of us can contribute to the culture of inclusion. Professor Waldron says that something as little as drinking a cup of tea during the week with a disabled friend would already create a big change. The saints have very fascinating life stories. Some of them were endowed with the ability to heal people or to perform miracles. Others were people with extraordinary personality traits. But sainthood is not only about possessing something extraordinary. Saints are truly and simply those who, with their lives, have pleased God. Blessed Maria Dolores Rodriguez Sopeña is an example of simple, holy life. She was born in the middle of the 19th century into a wealthy family, but she chose to dedicate her life to the sick and the poor. Paulo Merenda, the postulator of the canonization cause of Blessed Dolores, said that she was a significant figure for the Catholic social doctrine and also for the right role of women in society in the Church.
Let's not forget we are at the end of the 19th century. This is several years before Pope Leo XIII writes his Rerum Novarum, the encyclical dealing with labor and the world of the new working class. So we can say that many years before the publication of the encyclical, Dolores was ahead of her time. Her aims in establishing her social houses and all that would follow till her religious congregation called the Sisters of the Catechetical Institute are the same as in the Pope's encyclical years later.
Blessed Dolores was 52 when she founded this new religious institute.
The institute is established at the end of the 19th century, and in 1907, Pope Pius X himself gives his formal approval.
She was the first woman in the history of the Church to receive the approval of the constitution of a new institute by the Pope himself. She decided that the members of her congregation would not wear the habit so that they could be closer also to those who were anti-clericalist, and her institute became one of the first religious lay communities. St. Pope John Paul II beatified Dolores on March 23, 2003. During the celebration, he said that the problems of emigration, the social tensions or globalization of our day, brought Blessed Dolores Sopeña to dedicate her life to performing works of evangelization.
Dolores
was a small woman, in the sense that she was good-natured and simple, but also very determined and strong. She loved the poor. She loved those who have been cast away from society. She gave her life to them.
Today, Dolores Sopeña is an example of saintly life to thousands of people. Currently, the Sopeña family counts 3 institutions founded by the Blessed herself and the organizations that follow her charism. Thanks for watching. Stick around for more on Vaticano. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano.
Station, this is Isa PAO here in the Vatican. How can you hear me?
On October the 26th, Pope Francis communicated by live audio-visual connection with the crew of the International Space Station.
Jules, Isa PAO in the Vatican. This is Space Station. We hear you loud and clear.
Very good, thank you. I now hand over to Pope Francis.
Good morning, you all.
Expedition 53 is made up of 6 astronauts. 1 of them is from Italy, 2 from Russia, and 3 from the United States. Italian space engineer Paolo Nespoli held the conversation and provided translations. In Italian, the Pope addressed 5 questions to the astronauts on topics varying from the place of humanity in the universe to the personal desires of the astronauts to explore space.
What do you think of calling love the force that moves the universe?
Answering this question, Russian cosmonaut Sergei Ryazansky said that he had found the answer in the book of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, The Little Prince.
The best example of what love is represented in this book, because this small boy was ready to give his life to come back, protect, and take care of his unique flower. I like this answer, and it's true. Without love, we wouldn't be able to give our life for another person.
On the question regarding what motivated them to become astronauts and what they enjoy about being in space, U.S. astronaut and mission commander Randolph Bresnik said that it is to look outside and see God's creation maybe a little bit from his perspective.
As we see the peace and serenity of our planet as it goes around at 10 kilometers a second, and there's no borders, there is no conflict, it's just peaceful. And you see the thinness of the atmosphere. It makes you realize how fragile our existence here is.
The video connection lasted about 20 minutes and connected the Vatican with the International Space Station, which is 220 miles away.
Signore benedica voi. May the Lord bless you, your work, and your families. I can assure you that I will pray for you. And you too, please pray for me. Thank you.
Pope Francis became the second pope to speak in live streaming to astronauts orbiting the Earth. The first was Pope Benedict XVI in 2011. Not only is the Vatican holding a live link-up with the International Space Station, but it also has its own observatory. And it's right here, some 20 miles away from the city of Rome, by the volcanic Lake Albano, where the air is cleaner and the nights are darker. At these laboratories work the Pope's astronomer, Jesuit brother Guy Consolmagno. Since 2015, the brother has been the director of this special observatory. But is the Church really interested in astronomy?
There's a very practical reason why the Church has an astronomer. And it got started 125 years ago, 1891. Pope Leo XIII was looking for a way to show the world that the Church supports science.
Since that time, the group of scientists include every field of astronomy, practicing both faith and science.
So my own field is planetary sciences. I'm interested in how planets were formed 4.5 billion years ago. We have a collection of meteorites here at the Vatican that was donated by a wonderful nobleman 100 years ago. And we measure their physical properties. We put together tables of the density and the porosity and the magnetic properties and the thermal properties. And the rest of the scientific world uses our data.
The Vatican Observatory, also called the Specula Vaticana, is one of the brightest examples of the fruitful collaboration between the Church and the scientific world. Although this partnership may seem contradictory to some.
You've got somebody here who's got an MIT ring and a collar. I love wearing both of them together because it shocks people out of the idea that somehow science and religion are opposed. They're not opposed. They don't have to be opposed. And anybody who tells you they are opposed is selling you something. And you got to be suspicious. What are they trying to sell you?
Brother Guy is sure that faith and science complement each other because they're answering different questions. Scripture tells us that God created the universe, and science tells us how He did it.
And when I see the stars in a place where it's really dark, I never cease to be amazed and just have my breath taken away. And every now and then, I'll stop seeing the sky as a dome with dots on it, which frankly, that's the way we all think of it. And suddenly I can realize that Milky Way is a disk of stars and I'm in the middle of it.
Here, at one of the oldest astronomical institutes in the world, faith and reason work together to discover how great God's creation is. Join us next week on Vaticano and run with us the race of the saints. Thanks for watching.